Have you ever had one of those nights where the room feels too quiet, your thoughts are too loud, and it feels like even God has stepped away? You've prayed, you've cried, you've done everything you know to do, but all you hear is silence. What if I told you that the silence doesn't mean He's gone, that in your loneliest, hardest moments, He's actually closer than your next breath? It's late. The world outside your window is still, but inside your mind is running laps. Bills that don't add up, a relationship that feels like it's slipping through your fingers, a diagnosis you never saw coming. Or maybe it's just that heavy, nameless weight pressing on your chest, making it hard to even get out of bed in the morning. You scroll through your phone hoping for some distraction, but every highlight reel from someone else's life just makes you feel more behind, more alone. You try to pray, but the words don't come. You close your eyes, but instead of peace, all you see are the problems stacked up like a wall in front of you. Somewhere in your heart, there's a whisper asking, does God really see this? Does He see me? You've heard the sermons, sung the songs, but right now those truths feel far away, almost like they were written for someone else. And yet, deep down, there's this tiny ember of hope that maybe, just maybe, God is closer than it feels right now. That He hasn't turned His face away. That in this moment, in your mess, He's right here. Life has a way of stacking weights on our shoulders until we can barely stand. It's not just one thing. It's the little disappointments mixed with the big heartbreaks. The small stresses that pile up until they feel like boulders. Studies say more people than ever are dealing with anxiety, depression, and burnout. But statistics don't capture the ache of a heart that feels unseen. We live in a world that rewards pretending everything is fine, even when we're quietly falling apart inside. So we keep smiling in public, but at home, we crumble. And in those moments, when life feels too heavy, it's easy to start wondering if God has stepped back, if maybe He's too busy with bigger problems, if we've somehow slipped through the cracks of His care. But the truth is, these moments of heaviness have always been part of the human story. We're not the first to feel overwhelmed, to wrestle with the fear that maybe we've been left to figure it all out on our own. Even the strongest believers in history felt this tension. And the question that hangs in the air, sometimes loud, sometimes in a whisper, is the same one they asked, God, where are you right now? There's a question that slips into the cracks of our soul when the night feels endless. God, where are you? It's not always shouted. Sometimes it's barely a breath, a thought we don't even want to admit we've had. But it's there. David, the man after God's own heart, cried out in Psalm 13, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever?" Job sat in the ashes of his life and asked why God had let him come this far, just to suffer so deeply. Even Jesus, hanging on the cross, felt the crushing weight of separation and cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" These moments are not signs of weak faith. They're the evidence of a heart that longs for God's presence so desperately that it aches when He feels far away. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there right now, looking at your circumstances and wondering if heaven has gone silent. But here's the part we often forget. Asking, "Where are you?" doesn't push God away. It actually pulls us closer to the truth. Because even in asking, we're still talking to Him, we're still reaching, still hoping that He will answer. And He does, every single time. God has never been in the business of leaving His people alone in the dark. His promise has always been the same, from generation to generation, "I am with you." In Isaiah 41:10 He says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." Jesus echoes that same heartbeat in Matthew 28:20. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. These aren't just nice words meant to sound comforting. They're a binding commitment from the creator of the universe. Think about it. The one who hung the stars has never once misplaced one, and he's not about to lose track of you. His presence doesn't depend on whether you can feel it in the moment. Feelings come and go, but his nearness is constant, like oxygen. You may not always notice it, but it's sustaining you all the same. When God says, "I'm here," he's not saying it casually. He's speaking as the God who stood with Daniel in the lion's den, who walked through the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who met Paul in a prison cell. His "I'm here" is backed by centuries of proof that he never abandons his own. And that same promise still stands for you today. Elijah knew what it was to feel like the world had caved in. After standing boldly on Mount Carmel and watching God send fire from heaven, he found himself running for his life, drained and terrified. In 1 Kings 19, he collapsed under a broom tree in the wilderness and prayed that it would all just end. He felt like a failure, convinced he was completely alone. But God didn't scold him for being weak. Instead, he sent an angel, not with a lecture, but with food and water. Twice, the angel told him to eat and rest, because the journey ahead was too much for him. Then, when Elijah was ready, God led him to Mount Horeb. And it was there, not in a raging wind, not in an earthquake, not in fire, but in a gentle whisper, that Elijah heard God's presence. That's often how he shows up for us too, not always in big dramatic miracles, but in quiet, steady ways that meet us right where we are, when you're too tired to pray, too overwhelmed to think. He doesn't demand more of you. He comes to you with exactly what you need to keep going. Sometimes his "I'm here" feels like strength you didn't think you had left, or peace that makes no sense given the storm around you. And sometimes it's just the whisper that reminds you, you are not alone. Hardship has a way of building walls around us, making us believe no one could possibly understand what we're going through. It's like a fog that settles in, blocking out the light and convincing us we're the only one walking this road. Isolation isn't just a feeling, it rewires how we think. Psychologists have found that loneliness can magnify pain, heighten fear, and even change how our brains process hope. Spiritually, it distorts the truth, whispering lies that God has left or doesn't care. That's exactly how the enemy works. If he can get you to believe you're alone, he can make you give up before you see God's deliverance. But isolation is a mirage. The truth is, we are never as alone as we feel. Even when you can't see anyone walking beside you, God is right there. And often, he's already moving in ways you can't see yet, arranging people, resources, and moments to remind you that his presence is not a theory. It's a reality. The challenge is that in the middle of pain, our senses can't always detect it. But just because your eyes can't see the sunrise yet, doesn't mean it's not already on its way. Sometimes God's "I'm here" shows up wrapped in human skin. It's the friend who texts you out of the blue with exactly the words you needed to hear. It's the neighbor who brings over a meal when you've had no energy to cook. It's the co-worker who notices you've been quiet and takes the time to check in. These moments might feel random, but they're not accidents. Over and over in Scripture, God uses people as carriers of his presence. Think of Aaron and Hur holding up Moses' arms when he was too tired to hold them up himself. Think of Ruth refusing to leave Naomi's side, saying, "Where you go, I will go." God often speaks through kindness, through encouragement, through the simple act of someone showing up. The trouble is, when we're hurting, we can be so locked in our own pain that we miss these signs. But if you start to look for them, you'll begin to see that God's fingerprints are all over your relationships. Sometimes the hug you receive isn't just comfort, it's the arms of God reminding you that you're still held. Sometimes the conversation you have isn't just nice, It's an answer to a prayer you didn't even know how to pray. There are seasons when you reach for God and it feels like your hands close on empty air. You pray, but the words feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling. You open your Bible, but the pages seem flat and silent. It's in those moments that doubt can creep in like a slow leak, filling your heart with questions you never thought you'd ask. But silence is not absence. The Bible is full of moments where God's people endured stretches of quiet. Between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there were 400 years with no new prophetic word, and yet God was still moving, setting the stage for the arrival of Jesus. In your life, those silent stretches often mean something is happening beneath the surface, in ways you can't see yet. Seeds take time to sprout. Answers take time to unfold. The waiting feels empty, but it's actually full of God's unseen work. And even when you can't feel Him, His promise hasn't changed. He's still near. He's still listening. Sometimes the greatest acts of faith happen, not when we hear His voice loud and clear, but when we trust He's present, even in the quiet. When the storm is raging and everything in you wants to give up, the last thing you might feel like doing is leaning into God. But those are the moments when even the smallest step toward Him matters. Start with honesty. Tell Him exactly how you feel, even if it's messy. He's not afraid of your raw truth. If you can't find the words, borrow them from the Psalms. They're full of cries, questions, and declarations of trust. Keep a short verse close, one you can breathe out when your mind feels overwhelmed. Something as simple as, "The Lord is my shepherd," or "Be still and know that I am God." Let worship become a lifeline, even if you can only whisper along to a song. These are not just religious habits, they're lifelines that anchor you when the waves are high. On a practical level, they shift your focus from what you can't control to the one who can calm the storm. And over time, you'll find that those small acts of faith, those tiny choices to keep looking up, become the very things that carry you through. You don't have to fix everything at once. You just have to keep holding on to the hand that will never let go. Hopelessness is like quicksand. The more you struggle in your own strength, the deeper you sink. The way out isn't to try harder, it's to grab onto something solid. That's where God's truth comes in. Your mind can run a loop of worst-case scenarios on repeat, but you have the power to change the channel. Every time fear says, "You're alone in this," answer with, "God will never leave me or forsake me." When shame says, "You've failed too many times," answer with, "His mercies are new every morning." This isn't pretending your problems don't exist, it's choosing which voice you're going to let shape your reality. Science even backs it up. The more you feed your mind positive, truthful thoughts, the more your brain builds pathways to hope instead of despair. Spiritually, it's about agreeing with what God says rather than what your circumstances scream. And here's the thing, sometimes you have to do it over and over, 10 times a day if you have to. But each time, you're planting seeds of life where hopelessness once grew. And before you know it, the ground that felt dead will start to show signs of green again. A woman once told me her story of the year everything fell apart. Her husband left, her health collapsed, and her savings drained to almost nothing. She said there were mornings she couldn't even lift her head from the pillow because the weight of it all pressed her down. She prayed, but it felt like her prayers evaporated into thin air. Then one afternoon, in the middle of another tear-stained day, her phone rang. It was an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years, calling just to say she'd been on her mind and asking if she could help in any way. That call turned into groceries on the doorstep, bills quietly paid, and weeks of regular check-ins. Months later, when she looked back, she realized those moments weren't coincidences. They were God's way of saying, "I'm here." She never got a big miracle that erased all the problems overnight. But she got what she needed to make it through each day, one day at a time. And that was enough. She told me, "I thought I was forgotten, but now I know God had been with me the whole time. He just used other people's hands to hold me up." God's presence isn't always wrapped in something spectacular. Sometimes it's hidden in the everyday moments we take for granted. It's in the warmth of sunlight breaking through your window after a long night. It's in the sound of a child's laughter that makes you smile without even thinking. It's in the way a favorite song seems to find you right when you need it most. These small things aren't accidents. They're reminders, subtle but intentional, that you are still seen and loved. Jesus talked about how God notices even the sparrows, and how not one falls to the ground without the Father knowing. If He's that attentive to the smallest details of creation, how much more attentive is He to you? The trouble is, we often miss these touches of grace because we're looking for something bigger, louder, more obvious. But the more we train ourselves to notice, the more we start to see God woven into our days. Gratitude becomes the lens that reveals His fingerprints. And once you start seeing them, you realize His "I'm here" has been echoing all along, in the ordinary, in the quiet, in the moments you didn't even think to connect to Him. There comes a moment, often after the tears have slowed and the storm has lost some of its fury, when you look back and realize you made it through something you didn't think you could survive. You replay the nights you thought would break you, the days you walked through on autopilot, and you notice the threads that held you together. Maybe it was the strength to get out of bed when you swore you couldn't. Maybe it was a conversation that shifted your perspective just enough to keep going. Maybe it was simply waking up and realizing the crushing weight in your chest wasn't as heavy as yesterday. And in that moment, it clicks. You were never as alone as you thought. God was there in the details, in the pauses, in the spaces between the pain. His presence wasn't always loud or obvious, but it was steady, constant, unshakable. That realization doesn't erase what you went through, but it changes how you see it. You understand now that every step, even the ones you stumbled through, was guided by a hand that refused to let you go. And knowing that makes you braver for whatever comes next. Trust is a choice, and it rarely feels easy when fear is screaming louder than faith. But leaning into God's presence means deciding to believe His promises over your feelings. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight." That's not a call to ignore reality. It's an invitation to anchor your reality to something stronger than the storm. Fear says, "You have to figure this out on your own." Trust says, "God's already working, even if I can't see it." Fear makes you hold tighter to control. Trust opens your hands and lets God lead. And each time you choose trust, even in a small way, it becomes a habit. You start to see patterns, how He showed up last time, how He made a way before. Those memories become fuel for your faith. You're no longer just hoping God will be faithful. You're remembering that He's already proven He is. And the more you choose trust over fear, the more you find yourself walking in peace, even when the path ahead is still unclear. Looking back over the journey, it's clear that hard seasons are not proof of God's absence. They're often the backdrop where His presence shines the brightest. From the moments you questioned if he even saw you, to the quiet ways he sent help, to the peace that didn't make sense in the middle of the storm, all of it has been threaded with his steady, "I'm here." Life will still have its valleys, but you now know the truth. You don't walk them alone. That truth changes everything. It means you can face tomorrow with courage, not because it will be easy, but because you know who will be with you in it. It means the silence doesn't scare you like it used to, because you've learned that God can speak through whispers as powerfully as he can through shouts. It means even the smallest blessings carry weight, because they're reminders of a God who never forgets his children. And as you carry this with you, you'll find that hope is not just something you're holding on to. It's something that's holding on to you. God's presence is not a someday promise. It's your right now reality. And it's yours to lean on, today and every day after.